So welcome, everybody. For those of you who haven't met us at one of our events, I'm Annie Everall from Authors Aloud, and my colleague Naomi is there giving you a wave at the moment, and our wonderful Bev Humphrey is in a car travelling north at the moment, but is with us to make sure that Zoom behaves itself as well as it can. So I'd also like to introduce Phoebe Williams to you from Penguin Random House, who've published the fantastic books that we're going to be talking about tonight. Phoebe, I'm not sure if you've gone shy and muted your screen, but if you haven't, just give a little wave, because I have oh, she's there. I was in speaker view. So anyway, nice to see you, Phoebe. It's nice having you here. So tonight we're celebrating the publication of the final volume in Jamie Littler's Frostheart trilogy, Rise of the World Eater, and The Ice Whisperers by Helenka Stachera. And the shape of the event, for those of you who've been already to other events, you'll know I'm going to be talking to both of the authors and asking them some questions. And then towards the end of the evening, we'll open it up to questions from you, our audience. So please, if you've got any questions or comments about how much you've loved the books, if you've been able to read them, pop it into the chat box. If you've got a question, put a big Q, and whichever author you would like to answer the question, and or both if you'd like a response from both of them. As always, signed book-plated copies can be purchased via Spalding Books order line, and either Naomi or Bev will pop the order line into the chat box, so you've got the link to be able to order. Each of the Frostheart titles are £8.50, or you can have a special bargain of bundle of 3 for £21. So can't say better than that. And The Ice Whisperer is also £8.50, and that includes postage and packing. So a very good deal. And remember, you know, December, Christmas, just round the corner. So they make fantastic Christmas presents. So can I ask you now to all switch off your mics and your cameras so that I can welcome and introduce Jamie and Helenka. So, hi. Jamie is an author and illustrator who graduated from the Arts Institute at Bournemouth in 2008. He won a high commendation in the Macmillan Children's Book Award. His illustration work includes Hamish and the World Stoppers, which was the best-selling children's debut of 2015, and Wilf the Mighty Warrior, which was shortlisted for the Laugh Out Loud Book Awards. He's the creator, writer and illustrator of the comic series Cog and Sprocket, which was serialised in that wonderful children's comic, The Phoenix. And he illustrated the new editions of Enid Blyton's The Famous Five. Apparently, his interests are pretty wide and varied, and he does have a soft spot for wild animals and things that go bump in the night. Hopefully, we don't get any of those tonight. Apparently, when he's not trying to tame his unnaturally fast-growing hair or having staring matches with next door's cat, and I can empathise with that, Jamie, he quite likes drawing, colouring in, cutting things out and sticking things in. I'm with you there. Frostheart was actually his first foray into writing fiction, and it received such critical acclaim, and that has grown with each successive novel. Some of the reviews of Frostheart, The Guardian said, Littler's debut is wild, funny, lavishly illustrated and filled with excitement. The bookseller said, it's a rip-roaring action-adventure full of humour, heart and unforgettable characters, all enhanced by Littler's wonderfully detailed black and white line drawings. Expect big things. And then the most important ones of the reviews. This is a 10-year-old who says about the third in the Frost Heart series, this is the third book in the Frost Heart series and just as good as all the others. In this book, Ash and his friends have to stop the devourer so that it doesn't destroy the whole of Aurora and its people. This is an exciting adventure mystery story. My favourite character was Ash because he tries to stop all the bad things in the world all at once. And Luna because she is a friend to Ash and is funny and kind. I would like to be Luna's friend. I would recommend this book for people aged 9+ because it has some points which made me feel sad. And then the other end, we've got a 13-year-old who says the last book in the trilogy, all 3 books, brilliant. If you like adventure books, then these books would be great for you. This book ties everything up nicely. It was well written. I will look for more books by Jamie Littler. The illustrations are great too. And then Jenny says, the illustrations are amazing. The plot, epic. The world, vast, imaginative and vivid. And the characters, utterly believable, understandable, and their stories engaging. The writing is funny, clever and emotional at times. I laughed out loud in places and found myself welling up at others. And the book never patronises its readers, making it an enjoyable read for all ages. Helenka grew up in a yellow brick house with her British mum and Polish dad. And she says this is what stoked a lifelong obsession with fairy tales and legends. She's a graduate from Bath Spa and she's now based in Bristol with her husband. She wrote this magical novel to explore themes of family and belonging, themes which are very dear to her heart. And I hope she'll explain a little bit why as we go through the evening. The Ice Whisperers is her debut novel. It was published last week and it's already getting lots of positive reviews and discussion. So Maria Kuzniar says, it's an epic, icy adventure with a warming tale of sisterhood at its heart. Zilla Bethel says, every way I look at it, I love this book, from the crystalline brilliance of its surface to its tender, glowing heart. And then Alma, a child on the Book Nook website, said, I really like this book because it made me feel like I was there. I also liked the relationship between the 2 sisters, as it was more realistic than in some books. I say this as at first Renya, the older sister, doesn't trust Bella, but then their relationship grows and develops until they are extremely close. Jamie, Helenka, it's my pleasure to be with you both tonight. So maybe we can start our conversation off with, perhaps you could each tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into writing. So who would like to start off first?
Oh, goodness. Do you want to take it, Helenka?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess it will be no surprise to anyone that I was a bookworm when I was growing up, and I love books and I love reading and fairy tales and legends and all of those things. And then when I was a teenager, I used to write poetry, and it used to get like published in the school magazine or something like that. And people would say, oh, you know, that's really, really good. But nobody ever said to me, it's really good. Why don't you be a writer, or why don't you be a poet? Because I think there was an idea at the time that, you know, you should go and get a sensible job. And certainly my parents were very much the view that I should go and get a sensible job. And so that is what I did. And so I became a teacher, and I was a teacher for about 20 years. And I'm sure there'll be teachers among you, and you'll know what a busy job it is. And so even though when I was a child, I had this idea that maybe I would be a writer, and it was kind of a dream, I kind of forgot about it because I was so busy. And then I had my son, so I was even busier as a parent, and I was a deputy head in a school, and so there was just no time to do any writing. And then I think the turning point came when I discovered that somebody that I went to university with, who'd been a close friend, I'd lost touch with them, but I discovered that they had published a book. And just seeing that happening to somebody that I knew made me think that I could do it as well. It wasn't about someone who was totally special. Ordinary people could do that too. And I think perhaps that's why I think it's so important that children get to meet authors, because we are just ordinary people and they can see that anyone really could possibly be a writer. So I was working at a school, and then I just thought, I'm just going to give my job up. And I had no job to go to, but that is what I did. And I thought, I saved up a bit of money, and I thought, I'm just going to do some writing. And then I was very lucky because a part-time job came up at Bath University, and I got it. And they wanted me to do a master's. And I said, well, I'd love to do the master's in writing for young people. And I was lucky enough to get on the course. And that really kick-started my writing for children.
Amazing. Yeah, my story is kind of startlingly similar, actually, especially in the sense of like doubting yourself and things. So like Helenka, I think a lot of people who go on to create books. I've always loved books and reading and storytelling, and ever since I was young, I was drawing just piles and piles and piles of drawings and comics and characters. But the thing was, it wasn't ever just doing a drawing for a drawing's sake. It was also, I was coming up with backgrounds for these characters. I was creating worlds, even though they were like often quite like at the time rip-offs of like Star Wars and Jurassic Park and Ghostbusters and things. I was like trying to come up with my own twists on them and versions. And that went through all the way through my teens and everything. But I think it was the same kind of doubt that I was often told, like, wow, your drawing's so good and things like this in school, and people who would see my drawings and stuff. But it was never said about my writing. And my mum was a graphic designer. My dad is an animator. So I was kind of constantly surrounded by art. So to me, art felt like, even though it's incredibly hard and competitive field to get into, it felt achievable because I was constantly surrounded by it. But with writing, I very much had this belief that an author was a very special type of person, like some kind of aged scholar, like working away on their ancient tomes and scrolls and things, some real like literate genius and things. So I always felt like it was something kind of beyond me, even though I loved storytelling so much, and my dream was always to do both, to tell stories with words and pictures. So I went to university and studied illustration, as was said, and I kind of specialized in the last year in children's books, and was still like, so I tried to create my own children's book, and that was the one that won the high commendation in the Macmillan Prize. But again, a lot of the feedback I was getting was like, it was all about the art and less so about the story. People really enjoyed the story, but they felt like it didn't quite fit this or that. And I tried a few times to get my stories out there, but it was always, the attention was always directed to my artwork. And it was when I got my agent, Jodie Hodges, who's brilliant. She was like, look, we can keep working on the storytelling stuff, but why don't we focus on the art for now, because we can get you some works. By then I'd quit my my day job, because I was like, I really want to try and take this seriously, and I was just finding my day job was taking up so much of my time that I was just barely getting any time to create. So I had to take this big risk where I was like, luckily I was able to live with my parents at the time, and I was just like, I'm just going to have to see how this goes for the next few months, and if it all fails, I'll just have to go out and get a day job again. So I had a lot of eggs riding in this basket, but luckily I was getting the illustration work, but I still felt too intimidated to kind of show my stories. And as Helenka said, it wasn't until I started working with other authors that I started to realize that they were all, like, I thought I didn't know what they would do, what I was doing. They also didn't know what they were doing. You know, everyone was just stumbling around in the dark, throwing words at paper, and it seemed to work. You know, and this was actually a massive confidence boost that I just thought, this is something that normal people can try and reach for and achieve, especially if you have a fire and a passion to try and tell a story. So I took that leap in the end, and I had a lot of rejections, a lot of ways I needed to get better and grow as a writer. But then when Frostheart finally was bought by Puffin, it was a dream come true, quite literally. It was just it was fantastic. So
which segues very neatly into my next question, which is, would you like to tell us what your books are about and where the idea came from? So Jamie, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, sure. So my book is it's a rip-roaring fantasy adventure set in this dangerous frozen world called the Snow Sea. And this world is dangerous not least because of the lack of resources and the freezing temperatures, but because it's haunted by these deadly, dangerous monsters called leviathans, which hide underneath the snow and ice and devour anyone like willing or stupid enough to set foot on it. So people are like having to hide away in these stronghold settlements, like trying to protect themselves from these monsters. And the story's about a boy called Ash, who lives way up in the northernmost reaches of this world, waiting for his parents who went missing when he was a baby. So he's been left in the care of this grumpy, fierce Yeti warrior called Tobu, who's quite mysterious in himself. But as the story goes on, a big accident happens, and we realise that Ash has these special powers, and he ends up being whisked away on this huge galleon-sized sleigh, explorer sleigh called the Frostheart, crewed by like brave adventurers, and they go out into this dangerous world because Ash's powers can help them, and Ash hopes to discover more about what his powers mean and where his parents might have gone, trying to find his parents. And the idea came from lots of places. So I said before, like I was trying for a long time to try and find my voice and a story I wanted to tell, and I mentioned I had quite a few rejections. Sometimes I would actually say 80% of my stories never made it past my house, my living quarters, and they never will, because they're very embarrassing, and I was trying to find my way and stuff. But like there were elements of these stories that I really liked, and certain things that really appealed to me about them that I kind of kept a hold of. And one of them was like kind of separate tribes or peoples that all had very distinct looks and cultures, and we could like explore those cultures and peoples throughout the story and adventures. And another thing was this thing of a ragtag crew crewing some kind of vehicle or something. I've always loved those kind of stories where you almost feel like you're part of the crew, hopefully by the end of the story or something, and then it all kind of culminated because I'd got so many rejections, as I said. I think a big part of that was because I was trying to tell story ideas, or we'll get on to that later. But like, basically, I was walking to work, and I was thinking of the floor is lava, that weird game where you can't touch the floor, so you have to do everything you can to stay on furniture or climbing frames or trees or whatever. And I just thought, wouldn't that be a cool concept for a world where you can't touch the floor? And I was like, how would these people live? How would society work in that situation? And suddenly all these different ideas I had started like clumping together. And before I knew it, I had the idea of Frostheart in my head.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, Helenka, if you can tell us about your book and your idea, then maybe we could persuade both of you to do a little reading from one of the books to give us a taste. So Helenka,
I love this idea about the lava and not being able to touch the ground. That's just brilliant.
It's come from the weirdest places, right? Like it's just the smallest things. Yeah.
Okay, so a bit about the Ice Whisperers then. It's a magical Ice Age adventure, and it's set in the spirit world of an ancient human people who are now extinct. And this spirit world, much like Jamie's world, is full of dangerous creatures, Ice Age creatures that really would have existed, like woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, but also these fantastical creatures that have been inspired by fairy tales and legends, as well as some research and sort of cave paintings and some artifacts from the Ice Age. So it's a story about what happens when an archaeologist is digging in the ice and he comes across a human body that's been frozen for 40,000 years. And when he digs it up, much to his surprise, she opens her eyes and comes back to life. And so that's how that sort of kicks off the whole story. But I think at its heart, it's the story about two sisters, Bella and Renya, and they were born 40,000 years apart, each one not knowing that the other even existed. But both of them are struggling with some aspect of their identity. And so for Bella, she is sort of thinking, who am I? Where do I belong? She has a particular sort of skill, really, where she can taste the emotions and intentions of other people. And she's wondering, why have I got that and no one else has? And she also has on the palm of her hand a tattoo that's a sort of dots in the shape of a triangle. And she's thinking, you know, what does this mean? Renya's quite different, really. She knows absolutely who she is. She knows she's meant to be a hunter and a warrior. But for her, she's stuck in time in the Ice Age world, in the spirit world, and she's not able to grow up and become the hunter and the warrior that she's supposed to be. And so these two very different characters, these two very different sisters, have to come together if they're going to save the spirit world and if they're going to avenge the death of their mother.
So sorry.
So shall I say something about where some of those ideas came from?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about how some of these things are very close to my heart, and definitely my family and my family situation is definitely at the heart of this. And so when I was 10 days old, I was adopted. And so my adoptive parents were a Polish man and a British woman, and they took me home and brought me up as if I was their own daughter. And I'm sure any adopted person will have a million questions about, you know, who their birth parents are and so on. But certainly when I was adopted, I think it may be different now, but there was so little information. And so my mum told me my name was Jill Scarlett when I was born. And so my mother had just read Gone with the Wind. So this tiny little bit of information sort of came to me. And I knew my father was an Italian, but that was literally it. And so I spent such a long time when I was a child thinking, oh, you know, making up stories, wondering where I might have come from. And I do think that, like Bella in particular in this story, that's very much sort of driving my story imagination, really, I would say.
Thank you. So can I ask you then to do a little reading for us to give us a taste? I don't know who would like to go first.
I'm happy to go first if you want, or vice versa. I'm easy, really. Like, shall I go?
Yeah, you go first then, Jamie.
Yeah, sure. I'm starting a little bit from chapter 7 of the first book, Frost Heart. Just a quick bit of background. Ash is he's just taken part in this fire festival in his home stronghold of the Firer, and the warning horns have been sounded that warn of a Leviathan attack. So here we go. Ash joined the crowd in their stampede to the top of the battlements, everyone desperate to see what was happening. His heart raced as he climbed the wooden gangplank, pushed and shoved by the crush of people, nearly throwing himself over the battlements in his hurry to see out. There, racing towards the stronghold from the south, snow trailing behind it like a white tail, was a Pathfinder sleigh. Ash's heart jolted. Pathfinders! All Firer were thrilled when Pathfinders arrived, especially since it was incredibly rare to find them this far north these days. But it was always particularly exciting for Ash. Deep down in his heart, he couldn't help hoping that his parents might be returning to him to scoop him up and make everything right. He reached into his furs and grasped his ocarina. Could it be them? He didn't have long to wonder. The sleigh was under attack from 4 hurtlers, particularly hideous leviathans that looked very much like jaws on legs. Hurtlers didn't hide under the snows to catch their prey like lurkers and other such leviathans. They were fast. They didn't need to. They simply ran them down. They were so fast, I should say. But this time they seemed to be well matched. The enormous sleigh they were chasing was like a mini stronghold in itself, its huge bulk as high and mighty as stronghold walls, its massive runners as long as the alderman's lodge. Tall red sails rippled in the biting wind, the symbol of a snowflake woven into their designs. Large propellers and a sunstone-powered engine thrust the vessel forward at an incredible speed. But despite this technical marvel, the hurtlers had no trouble keeping up with the sleigh, charging through the snow with their powerful legs, biting at the runners like wolvers snapping at the feet of Ulk. Ash could see their song aura, a mess of frantic, lashing shapes that trailed behind them like crimson smoke. "Hunters, to your positions," ordered the huntsmaster. "Man the battlements, load the harpoon launchers." Ash watched the hunters take defensive positions along the wall, Tobu alongside them, reminding Ash to yank down the mask he'd forgotten he should be wearing amid all the excitement. The fire hunters scrambled, bows at the ready. Others pulled the cranks and aimed the large harpoon launchers that squatted on the walls. Tobu drew an arrow from his quiver and knocked it to his bow. The sleigh itself was badly damaged, but the Pathfinder crew, little dots from this distance, were doing their best to fend off the monsters. Ash saw one jab a spear right at a hurtler's great maw. The creature wrapped its long serpentine tongue around the shaft, twisted its head and wrenched it from their hands, nearly pulling them over the side to their certain doom. Another hurtler screeched and rammed the sleigh, arrows clacking off its thick hide as the crew desperately tried to drive it back. The captain was clearly skilled, however, and pulled the sleigh back on course with a skid. They sped towards the ramp that the firer were now lowering from the walls, the large ropes that held it up creaking from the strain of the heavy wood. The Pathfinders had to make it, or they'd soon be torn to pieces. I'll leave it there.
Fabulous. Helenka, over to you. Let's have a taste of the Ice Whisperers.
So I'm going to read you a short bit from the beginning, where Renya spots some Homo sapiens invading her Siberian homeland. So, northern Siberia, 40,000 years ago. The wind changes direction, veering from the west to the north. Renya lifts her face to the breeze and sticks her tongue out into the drifting snow. She tastes pine resin, the mineral tang of ice, the day-old musk of elk. But something else is carried to her on the wind from far away, something that burns the back of her throat. She recognizes the faint, sharp flavor, white eyes. Renya follows the flavor upwind. Her snowshoes make her fly, and she hardly leaves a mark as she runs over the deep white drifts. She positions herself at the top of a ridge. Crouched behind a stand of gnarled spruce trees, she waits. The morning passes, and at last the invaders appear, hunched figures emerging from a ghostly mist. Renya watches from her hiding place as they approach, counts them as they pass beneath her. 10 shrouded warriors lead the way, their heads feathered under their hoods. Then come the followers, strung out in a line behind them, walking in twos. Each pair hefts long wooden poles between them that creak with the weight of bison hides, water sacks, the dangling limbs of a recent kill. They slog on, heads bowed. From time to time, one of them looks up and she catches sight of their eyes. They are milk white, and in the centre, each has a darting circle that is brown or grey, sometimes blue. So different to the wide black eyes of Renya's people, the last. Animals travel with the white eyes. They look something like wolves, only they lick the human's hands and trot at their heels as no wolf ever would. One draws level with Renya, no more than 20 strides away. It lifts its blunt snout and snuffs at the air. But Renya has deadened her odour with juniper, and not even a cave bear could sniff her out. She follows them all day, and in the late afternoon, when the sun skims the tops of the trees, they stop and make camp. Renya watches as they gather firewood, erect the wooden poles and cover them with the bison skins. She listens to their chatter, although she cannot understand the sounds they make. They are as alien to her as their animals are to wolves. yet she has heard them laugh and even sing. She is both fascinated and afraid. Part of her would like to step out, show herself, but although Renya is not yet grown, she knows they would skewer her before she had a chance to raise her empty hand in peace. As darkness falls, she slips away and runs through the night.
Brilliant. And yeah, the Three Frost Heart and the Ice Whisperers, they just get better and better and better. And for me as a reader, one of the most important things are the characters in a story. I have to believe in the characters and you know, want to know those characters more. And I felt that I did with all of those books. You have a really amazing cast of characters, but what struck me was that both of your stories have very strong female characters at the centre of them. You know, Captain Nook, whom I loved, and Luna in Frost Heart, and both Raina and Bella in very different ways in the Ice Whisperers. Was that a conscious decision to, you know, put strong female characters front and centre? And what did you want them to say to your readers? Helenka, do you want to answer that first?
Well, before I had written The Ice Whisperers, I'd written another story, and it centred around two sisters. And, you know, they were quite cantankerous. They argued quite a lot, much as Renya and Bella do. And I enjoyed writing it so much that I just thought I'm definitely going to do that setup again. And also, I didn't grow up with a sister, but I always really, really wanted a sister. And so it's just been so wonderful to write about sisters, to imagine the sort of relationship they would have, arguing all the way through, but in the end, having absolute loyalty to each other. But I think also I enjoy writing about girls and showing them to be very strong. And I think it's quite important in literature in children's literature to have that sort of role model.
How about you, Jamie?
Yeah, I think it was a similar feeling in that, in how strong and how important I think it is to have strong female characters. I think whenever I start a story, this is going to sound so cheesy and lame, but like I do find often the characters feel like a certain gender or they just come to you in a certain way. So often it's just a natural thing. And I think it just, for some reason, all these characters in Frost Heart felt like females to me. But there was also when I originally wrote Frost Heart, the main character was going to be female as well. Ash was going to be female. And it was a decision that we changed him to a boy that I still really stand by, because we were saying like singing is so Ash's special power is the power of song weaving, which is to connect to the world around you, but also, and most importantly, to the Leviathan monsters. He has a connection to them through song. And I think very typically, whether right or wrong, singing can be seen as quite a feminine thing. So we wanted to do the opposite and show, because Ash was not your typical hero. He wasn't the classic boy character of being strong or fighty or like good at sport, or he was a lot more inspired by myself. He was a bit more of a gentle soul and that was really important as well. We really wanted him to be sensitive and the things that a classic boy character are not. But I think once we made that decision that the main character was a boy, I'm like, well, I still need to get my badass female characters into this story, you know. So it became quite, even though I started off the story with quite a lot of female characters, it was something I definitely wanted to include. You know, for instance, Luna, once Ash's role had been cast, as it were.
And she actually is very much like a partner. It's a partnership, that friendship, isn't it? So, you know, they bring different skills to each other. She, definitely. I mean, I would almost say that she's almost more the classic hero.
character. Like Renya kind of reminded me of her a bit, like this kind of no nonsense, just she knows what she wants and she's going for it. And also just because at the beginning of Frostheart, there was quite a lot of bad things happening to Ash. And this is quite a hostile, scary world in a way. And I felt like Luna was just that kind of optimism and brightness that I think the story and Ash really needed. And I think you're right. As hopefully that becomes clearer throughout the trilogy, that Ash wouldn't have made his journey without Luna's help, or Luna being there, just as his friend. So.
Yeah. And the other thing that really struck me about both, of your books, is that the description, the power of the descriptions and the visual imagery, and that young reviewer saying that she really felt that she was there in the story, and I understood exactly what she meant. The sense of place is really strong, and it wraps itself around the reader. For you, you've got the sights and the sounds of busy Aurora, and then that vast, beautiful, open landscape of the snow sea, and then descriptions like in The Ice Whisperers, when Bella's description of the iceberg, that it was like a cathedral of ice. How do you do that? How do you make the reader feel so much a part of your story?
I think I'll let you run with this one.
Well, I think one of the ways that I tried to do that was to use all the senses when I am trying to describe something as much as possible. So I'm thinking, what smells, what can I hear? So I think that actually research has shown that those parts of your brain that do those jobs kind of light up when you're reading those sorts of descriptions. And I think that really helps children to sort of link with what you've written. And sometimes I may have actually had that experience. So there's a whole section in The Ice Whisperers where Bella and Renya are in a labyrinth in the heart of a mountain, and it feels very claustrophobic in there. And I was lucky enough one time to go potholing when I was a teacher, and I took my tutor group potholing with me, and it was incredibly claustrophobic in there. And that, I think that experience has really helped to sort of enrich the writing.
Mm.
Yeah, I had the exact same advice put on me of the power of senses, and before for a long time, because my dad was an animator, I thought I knew that I wanted to get into film and animation like he did, which is one of the reasons I was always drawing and I was telling like storyboards and things like that. But as I got into books, you realize the wealth of detail you can get into a book that you just can't get into a film. And those are the smell of things, you can get sound and motion things, but the atmosphere of like how someone feels being in a place and what they're hearing and smelling and that kind of stuff is so visceral in books. And I think there's been a lot of studies done that show that children are particularly receptive to that as well. So it was always a conscious effort, as I was describing, to, number one, I think because I've always loved animation, it's a huge inspiration of mine. So I did want the thing to be quite cinematic. And I think as an illustrator, I see things quite visually. So I'd often do these big sketches in my sketchbooks of how a thing might look, and I'd try and describe it, but then I'd think, how would it feel to stand in that place? So that kind of fed into my writing and helped make the world feel a bit more alive. And then I would step back and think, am I focusing on all the senses? I'm not just saying what something looks like, I'm saying how it feels to be in that place. And yeah, I tried really hard to try and to get that feeling there, whilst I would also add, try not to be too descriptive, because I've also, sometimes you can fall in that trap of before you know it, you've written an entire page about this one mountain or something, how this mountain looks or something. So it was trying to get like basically because the POVs or the point of view is always through Ash. It's like, what would Ash feel in this place? And that was kind of my guide throughout the whole story. Yeah.
Do you see it like a film, Jamie? Does it all kind of reel out the film?
Almost exactly that. It reels itself off, and like it is trying to pinpoint that. Like how I don't know if you find, but like those action scenes and things like that, you can be like, there's so much going on, and you're like, I've just got to pick those. You've almost got to be the camera and just be like, what's important to show here? And do you feel the same, or is it?
Definitely, I see it all as a film, and so the visual bit I think comes very naturally to me, but I have to remember to put in the other senses, like the smell, the feel.
It's so easy to forget, isn't it? And I think that's when revisions come in so in handy, is because I'll do a revision where I'm just trying to make the entire manuscript read better and the story feel better, but I always try and do one revision where all I'm paying attention to is my descriptives, and I'm like, am I being too descriptive? Am I focusing on all the senses? And just trying to make that as kind of as real as possible, So, but yeah, I think film. I definitely felt like yours was very cinematic as well. It's all these sweeping landscapes, and I'd also like to really add quickly that I loved your idea of this other kind of form of human. The last. I just thought that was such a cool concept that I hadn't really seen in anything before. So, especially the way their eyes are slightly differently positioned and black and everything. I just thought that was such a cool concept. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Jamie.
I think in both of your novels there is a freshness and an originality, because sometimes fantasy can be very formulaic, and I think you bust out of that and bring something quite special to that whole concept of world building, and I think I also would like to kind of pay credit to the thing that also supports the beauty of your words is the superb production quality of the books. The covers, the end pages, it all works to support that idea of the world and what's in it. So who decides the look of how your book is going to look, and do you have any input into that process?
I think that's just Puffin being awesome, really. Like, I can't speak for Helenka, but like it was certainly like when it comes to actual production, the production of the book, that was the incredible production team, and I feel so fortunate and lucky that they just how to town they went to on Frost Heart. But I do remember going into those early meetings about what Frost Heart was going to be. And like as an illustrator, for like initially we knew that we wanted it to be really visual, lots of illustrations. And as I started doing these illustrations and sending them to my art director, Ben Hughes, he was just loved how much like detail was going on and stuff. And I was like, is this too much? And he was like, no, we want this. We want this world to feel alive and things. And he was like, I am going to have to get a slightly higher grade paper to get these to print properly. Otherwise, they're going to just be smears of ink, So, and he did a few tryouts to make sure that worked okay and things like that. And then when he gave me the thumbs up, it was like, okay, we can do this. And it was kind of the same with the cover. He was like, look, I have this idea for this cutout roundel. I'm not sure it's going to work, but do you mind like designing a few different covers so that if it doesn't work, we can do this? And I think I ended up designing, I came in with 26 roughly cover ideas. I was just like, I've got so many ideas. And we narrowed it down to about 4. And I ended up fully realizing 3 of them because the US edition ended up with quite a different cover as well. So, but yeah, I mean, just personally, I've got to really hand that kind of quality to Ben and the Puffin production team.
How about you, Helenka?
I was just going to say about Jamie's illustration that I was just, when I read Frost Heart, I've only read the first one, but I was just so blown away by those illustrations. They were just so fantastic, amazing.
That's very kind of you, yeah.
It's true. So when I discovered actually that The Ice Whisperers was going to be illustrated, I was just so thrilled because it wasn't something that I ever expected. I, just didn't think that would happen. But I didn't really have much of an idea what to expect. I mean, for you, Jamie, you obviously knew what kind of illustrations you were going to have. And so it was a really exciting process, and I was involved all the way along, so roughs would be sent to me. I'd be asked, what I thought of them. And at points, I would even sort of draw what some of the fantastical characters, very badly, I hasten to add. My drawings weren't very good, but, to give direction to how I thought those things should look. But the look of the book, to me, is just amazing and fantastic. It just looks beautiful. And yeah, I'm totally grateful for all the work that's been done on that.
And it is good to see middle grade fiction illustrated in the way that your books have been illustrated. So Phoebe out there, take a bow for Penguin Random and pass our comments on to your production team. So just
the nice comments as well about just that a book like that can have illustrations in it, and I people even say, even grown-ups saying, I wish adult books were like this illustrated and stuff, and illustrations can be amazing and enrich the experience. I think that's super cool. So.
Yeah, they can, and in lots of different ways. So it was really good to see. And just, I've got loads more questions, but I want to leave time in case anyone else has. Actually, both sets of books, yours and Jamie's, they both got some quite gruesome moments and some quite dark moments. There was a couple of bits. I mean, I'm vegetarian, and there was a couple of bits that thought if I wasn't, I would be, after having ready around the animal kills. So as a writer, how do you know how far you can go in a book for this age range? And are there any, for you personally, are there any do's and don'ts?
Well, I think for me personally, it's as long as it's not kind of gratuitous, So I think children can cope and withstand and even enjoy some quite intense things and subject matter and stuff. But I think if it's relevant to the story, I think then. That was at least my personal code, was put it in. And I was actually quite surprised with what I was allowed to get away with sometimes. Sometimes I was like, that's going to go, and Puffin didn't even mention it. Some things had to go, some things were quite intense and stuff, but I think as long as it's aiding the story or the characters in some way, and sometimes you need something really dramatic and oh my goodness, kind of inducing to really get a point across, or to show what the stakes are, or even to show, I think, both of our stories. Because I would agree, reading Ice Whisperers, there were some great descriptions of, as you said, of the hunting and the way they're preparing these animals and stuff, and but it helps flesh out the world and show how hostile and how gritty and real that kind of, and sorry, try not to hijack the Ice Whisperers there, but it was the same in Frostheart. I wanted it to feel like this world was a dangerous place to live, and hopefully it adds to the story rather than just being look, blood, guts, scary things.
No, it does definitely add to the story.
Yeah.
Helenka, do you want to comment?
I think that when I was a child, I really enjoyed reading kind of quite gruesome stuff, and so. But I'm with Jamie. I think that it has to be part of the story. It has to serve the story. Perhaps occasionally I probably did go a little bit too far, and then I have a wonderful editor who will just sort of, can we tame it down a little bit. So when there's a whole team working on a book, you can make sure that you get it right. But when you said, Jamie, that you were surprised sometimes with what you got away with, I sometimes felt like that. I thought, oh no, that's going to go, isn't it? And then it would still be there.
Yeah.
Which made me very happy.
Yeah, me too. It's yes.
Another clap for Penguin Random and their bravery. Okay. I'll just ask each of you. I've got a couple of questions specifically for each of you. So just a couple of quick ones while people put any questions they've got. So, Jamie, did the story come first or did the lullaby come first? How did that work?
That's quite a good question. I'm trying to think. I would say the story came first. I would say, first of all, it was so actually weirdly, the lullaby came in quite late into the story. So when I first wrote Frostheart, it was the spirit and soul and the concepts were all there, as were the characters. But we ended up, in my second draft, I ended up quite drastically changing the story with my editor, Naomi, and we brought in the whole kind of lullaby, almost treasure hunt aspect into my second draft. So in a way, like, I already knew what was going on in the story. So I thought, okay, so, and in the end, a lot of the story changed. So what I'm trying to say is, so the story was there, the characters were there, but then we brought in this idea of like, so this lullaby is leading Ash through through the magic of the world. And that became because I already had this kind of rough manuscript, I knew where we were going, but sometimes I thought, wouldn't it be cooler if the lullaby is leading him to this guiding figure or this place? So like sometimes the lullaby would end up affecting the story itself. And for those that don't know, the lullaby is quite an intrinsic part of the story now. It's Ash's father has left him this kind of magical lullaby that's meant to lead him to answers. And it's just weird that it actually became one of the major points of the trilogy. And I'm glad it did, and it felt so fitting for the rest of the story. Instead of Ash just finding a map or like a hidden note or something, to have this thing that was just so in theme of the world, which was, you know, this theme of like singing and using something that wasn't necessarily violent to overcome violence and hate and things like that. So I would say that the lullaby did shape some of the story, but I think I had the bulk of the story there already. For the lullaby to kind of affect.
So you did your own song weaving.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite hard actually, coming up with some of those rhymes and trying to make sure you were saying enough but not so that it's almost as a riddle stanza. So like some of the bits were quite like, I didn't want to be too vague, but also I didn't want the readers to be like, I know exactly where he needs to go for this or whatever. So it was actually some of the most challenging bits of the story. And I actually remember writing the last bit of the lullaby. I just had to go to Moorfields Eye Hospital, and had this pupil dilation stuff, and it was like the brightest summer's day. I could barely see. I was bumping into walls and everything, so I just ducked into a Starbucks nearby and just started trying to just like make some rhymes in my head. Like, I just have such a clear memory of that. Like, yeah.
Thank you. And one for you, Helenka. One of the most powerful passages for me was the beauty of the Remembrance, without giving any spoilers. That passage is, I think, so emotional, and I don't think it will ever leave me. It was that strong. What were you trying to say to your readers through that passage? Do
you mean the passage right at the end? When...
Yeah.
I found that really affecting as well. It was so
yeah.
Do you mean when she was sort of saying that she was going to be coming back into the world again?
No, when they were, she was with the warriors. They were with and having that remembrance ceremony.
Oh yes. Yeah, I know what you mean now. Yes. I was sort of trying to imagine. I sort of spent a lot of time sort of researching what people who lived in the past might have been like, and I felt that perhaps that's one of the ways that they would seek to remember the dead, and that they would tell stories about each other. There's many, many stories within the Ice Whisperers, isn't there? So one of the stories is about how the spirit world was born. And I really felt quite strongly that people in the past would have told stories that would have been their entertainment. It would have been the way that they linked together as a group. And so it felt that felt quite authentic to me, that they would then tell the stories of the people that had died, and that would really mean something to the whole group and bring them together.
It was just a beautiful piece of writing, and it really, It gives comfort, I think, and it makes you think and makes you feel. So I could go on, but let's have a look and see if we've got any comments or questions. Claire, who had to sadly had to bow out because her connection was just playing up. She was trying to tune in from the Pyrenees, and she said, Jamie, I adore Frostheart, and I'm so looking forward to the last book. Amazing and inspiring trilogy. Helenka, definitely going to read The Ice Whisperers. Have a wonderful evening and congratulations to both of you. Emma has said, my son Luke wanted to say, your books are fabulous. We're in the middle of the third book and I can't wait to find out what happens at the end. How do you come up with ideas for the different creatures like Master Pod and Tobu and are writing another book? I'd also like to say how I love how they're illustrated for children to see the value of pictures, especially for children who see picture books as books for younger children. As a teacher whose passion is books and reading for pleasure, this is so important.
Yeah, too right. I'm so glad you feel that way. That's lovely. Thank you. And I think you're right. And if we've learned some, like the Frostheart books are actually, they're quite big. But one thing, like especially for like more reluctant readers, that's really encouraged them to pick it up and read it. Where how heavily illustrated they were as well. So I think that's just another. It got someone who might have been a bit more intimidated at first to actually pick it up, which is wonderful. But yeah, as for your question, how do I come up with the creatures? So I think that very much came from my love of fantasy, and especially things like, I guess, like the Jim Henson films, like Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. And I love the idea of strange humanoid characters. They've got human traits and stuff, but that are like weird and wonderful and cool. And it goes right, the tradition goes right back to things like Narnia and stuff, doesn't it? And I think there's just something really nice and magical about of just having, even though I had like a very human story I wanted to tell in Frostheart, it didn't mean I can't have fantastical fun with it. So I knew I wanted to have some fun, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have some kind of like Arctic and Antarctic creatures like running around? So there were going to be penguin ones at some point who like were trying to fly, and they had like crazy flying contraptions. But I kind of, without running away, because also space is an issue. So I think the Mersu, who are kind of walrus people, and the Vulpes, who are like the Master Pods, like these fox-like creatures, they were the ones that kind of spoke to me the most. So I kind of ran with them. And yes, I am writing another book. It's top secret right now, I'm afraid, but hopefully it will be just as exciting and fun and magical as Frostheart. So yeah, but thank you so much for reading, Luke.
And Helenka, there's a question coming for you. Do you still write poetry, and have you published any?
I don't tend to write poetry now, but I do feel that experience of having written poetry is in my work. So I do feel that some of the things that I write feel sometimes to me a bit like poetry, but I think I've lost the knack. It was something I used to love doing, the sort of rhyming stuff, and I feel like that's sort of in the past, but you never know.
Never say never.
And even with my lullaby.
Well, sadly, I think I'm going to have to start to bring the evening to a close, although I think we could probably sit here and chat for another hour at least. There's so many other questions I've got. I think when I was preparing to for this event with you tonight, one comment that I came across was from someone called Gavin, who said, after reading the books, I can't even speak. I don't know if I have the words. I feel battered, bruised, but oh my, was that the best ride I'd been on in my life? And I knew exactly what he meant. People out there, if you haven't yet had the chance to read these books, I can't recommend them highly enough. Put them in your letters to Santa, or just treat yourselves. Earmark some time, curl up with chocolate, a glass of fizz, and tissues. Do not forget tissues, and just get lost in the worlds of Ash and Luna and Bella and Raina. And just to remind you that you can order a signed special book-plated copy, and the link is in the chat box. I just have to say, if you don't want us to keep your details on file so that we can let you know about future events, please email me and I will remove you from the list. And at that point, I just need to say a few thanks to Penguin Random House and Phoebe for asking us to host this launch tonight, for Bev, for, among many things, being in the background in a car, making sure Zoom behaves, and for Naomi, who is out there helping. But also for you wonderful folks out there for coming tonight, and always for supporting us by booking our authors and coming to our events. And finally, last but certainly not least, a special huge thanks to you, Jamie, and you, Helenka, for such a great evening. As I said at the beginning, this is a celebration of 4 fantastic books. So can I ask you at this point to all switch on, if you're not too shy, switch on your cameras, switch on your mics, get yourselves a glass of something or a mug of tea or whatever you want to drink, and join me in raising my glass to say huge congratulations to both Jamie and Helenka. Good sales, great books, and here's to the next one. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And cheers. And can we maybe, if everybody's got their cameras on, and if you're not shy, can we maybe take a screenshot? I think Bev is still there. She's the one that does the screenshots, but she may have lost the signal. Can we do that? Gallery. Okay, let me see if I can remember how it works. Well, we'll know afterwards whether I've worked or whether my tech skills have let me down yet again. So just that all that remains to say is I hope you've all enjoyed tonight. And I hope that we'll see you again. If we don't see you before Christmas, have a great Christmas, and we'll certainly, hopefully, see you in the new year. So, bye, everybody.